Hello everybody and a warm welcome to this afternoon's session on starters and leavers in Sage 50 Payroll. My name is Alice and I'm going to be delivering the session this afternoon. I am also joined by my colleagues Duncan, Paddy and Louise, who are on hand behind the scenes ready to answer your questions throughout the session as well. And let's take a look at what we're going to cover in today's session too. So there's two main halves of the webinar. Firstly, we're going to look at new starters. So the information you need for new starters, how to set them up and how to submit those details in your FPS to HMRC. And we've also put together some common questions as well, so some common queries and things, so a little bit further information about them. And then second half of the webinar, we're going to be looking at processing leavers. So the final payments for your employees, running them through the leaver wizard, and then of course producing the P45. And same as the starters, how to submit that information in your FPS to HMRC. And as we always do, we will have some further support at the end and some time to answer those last remaining questions too. So I'll start with telling you a bit of information about the information that you're going to need in order to add your new starters. And there are three main categories for this. So there's personal details, payment details, and starter form. Personal details, so this is going to be their full name as it shows on official documents and ID. No nicknames or shorter versions, so just the full name. The employee's address, so that's 2 lines and a postcode at least. You'll also need the date of birth, the gender, and NI number if that's available as well. For payment details, so you're going to need these to know how to pay them. This includes which pay elements you'll need to assign them, the rates of pay, so is that a fixed salary per payment period, or are they going to be getting paid hourly? And you'll also need to know how many hours they work, so what's their contracted hours, as this information will be submitted in the FPS. And for the starter form, you'll also need this from your employee. This is most commonly a P45 that they've got from the previous employer. But if they don't have one of these, it's also known as a starter checklist. That's another version of the starter form. And the starter checklist is what's replaced the old P46 form. Less common as well is the P46 pen or P46 expat form, which are used for payrolls that are paying out a pension to an employee or for employees seconded to work in the UK. But in today's example, I am going to stick to those more common starter forms, which will be the P45 and a starter checklist. So that's the information you're going to need. Let's take a little bit of a closer look at those forms now as well. So I've got a screenshot of each of them on this slide. On the left is the P45, and there are 3 parts to this. You're going to need part 2 to set up the employee's record in payroll, but you will also need to take part 3 from the employee. And then part 1, this is just the employee's copy. So if they give you that by mistake, just give that back to them. And then on the right, you've got the starter checklist as well. As I said, this is for when the employee doesn't have a P45, and it's available to download from the gov.uk website, which I've just linked on that slide there. Now, I'd always recommend having spare copies of this form anyway. It's great for capturing information about the employee, including things which aren't on the P45 as well, so such as student loan information. But once you've got that information that you need from the employee, you'll then be ready to set up the employee's record. And this is what I'll be showing you in the demonstration. There are 2 main ways to set up the employee record in Sage 50 Payroll. That's either via the employee wizard or the quick employee option. The employee wizard, this walks you through each step of setting up the record, and in my opinion is an easier way to see the information as it's kind of broken down step by step. This option also allows a bit more detail to be entered, but as a result it can possibly take a little bit longer to input that information. You've then got the quick employee option as well. So this opens up the page that you can see on the screenshot. So it's one page, you kind of work through it to input the information. And as with both of them, the required information that you're going to need to enter is marked with an asterisk symbol. I can never say that word. And as with the kind of quick employee option as well, as the name suggests, that is a bit of a quicker option for you as well. But regardless of which method you use, you do need to input the required information in order to set up the employee's record. And let me show you this now in the programme. So I'm just going to turn my camera off and bring Payroll up. And here it is. Now, before we actually set up the record for the new starter, I would like to show you a closer look at an example of a P45 and the starter checklist as well. So I'm just going to bring this across. This is just the one that I had on the slides as well, and with just a bit of a closer look at it. So it's got the employee's national insurance number on the left. Let me just zoom in a little bit. It's also got their name here too. The date they've left their previous employment as well. So this one is important. So make sure that the leave date is in the current tax year, so the 24-25 tax year. If it's not, you will have to do things a little bit differently, but I'll come back to that a little bit later in the webinar. Up in the top right, you've then got this, which is going to indicate whether student loan deductions should continue. But there's nothing really that provides any further details apart from that. And that's where the starter checklist could help. You've got the tax code at leaving date too, and if this code is cumulative. And you've also got their previous pay and, total pay and total tax to date as well. And again, that's for the current tax year. So this information will be entered into the new employee's record, meaning that the employee's tax can be calculated correctly on that cumulative basis. So it's a little bit of kind of the main details that you'll need from the P45. As I mentioned, you will also be given part 3 of the P45. This used to have more of a purpose, I suppose, but not so much since RTI came in, which was a while ago now. So you can just keep hold of part 3 of the P45, and that information will be automatically included in the FPS submission to HMRC. And let's also take a little look at the starter checklist as well. So this is what replaced the P46. And I have linked this article on the handout as well, but the starter checklist can be done online. So let me just scroll down. You do have a Start Now button, which will take you through a series of questions. But alternatively, it can be downloaded as a PDF as well. So let me just click on that one. So it is primarily for employees without a P45, but I would recommend getting your employee to fill it in anyway, as it's just a great way of capturing the personal details. So you've got them on that first page. They'll also answer a series of questions about their circumstances. So the answers from this will result in you being able to pick a relevant starter statement. That's either statement A, statement B, or statement C. And these statements are relating to their circumstances around jobs and whether the employee is in receipt of a state, workplace, or private pension too. And if I just scroll down, you've got page 3 as well. This is where you would input that student loan information, including the plan type and a few other questions to answer as well if they're repaying a student loan. So if you don't have a P45, this form will have everything you need to set up the employee's record as well. And speaking of, let's go back to Payroll and we'll actually set up that record now. So remember I said there's 2 ways to do this, and that's going to be either via the employee wizard or the quick employee option. And both of these can be found in your employee tasks. So if I click on employee wizard, this one is the one that allows you to enter the information step by step, well, page by page, I suppose, just using the next and back buttons to kind of work through it. Once you've inputted the information, you would then just click finish, and that would create the employee record. Or the quick employee option, that just brings up the one page. So everything is on one page here. You would just kind of work through the information. And as I said, everything with an asterisk symbol, that is a mandatory field. And then you would just click save at the bottom to create that record. Now, another option you've got, and this is really helpful if you're hiring someone who's working in the same department or has the same settings as another employee, is to copy the settings from an existing employee to that new employee record. It's also a great option if you're rehiring someone who's previously left your company, and it saves you inputting loads of information that you already have before. So just to show you what I mean, I'm going to highlight somebody that I'd like to base the new record off. So I'm highlighting employee number 3, and I'm just going to click on the employee wizard. So this time you'll see I now get some more options. So I can record the details of the new starter using the starter form. That was the kind of option that was already there as well. So that would be with a P45 or starter checklist. Or I can create an employee record based off an existing employee, and it does also confirm which employee that would be. So because I've got employee number 3 highlighted, it would base it off employee number 3. And then last option is to re-employ an employee. And this is if, for example, employee number 3 was a leaver, so they'd already left, and they actually rejoined my employment. It would recreate their record for this new employment, and it would copy over those personal details too. So it would save you some time. You wouldn't have to input everything again. And just to show you the same kind of thing with the quick employee option. So with that person still highlighted, I'll click new employee, and this time it's asking me if I want to base the new employee on the existing record and copy over some information. So I'm going to click yes. I just want to show you what information that brings in. So same window, but there is some fields already populated. So it's got the same pay elements as the employee had highlighted. It's also got the department as well, so it's copied that over. And the pay frequency as well. So they're already set to monthly, which saves me a few little things to do in here. So from here, it would just be a case of me entering the rest of the kind of mandatory information. So I'm just going to enter their name. Not very creative, I do apologise. Their address as well. And postcode. And also their email address. So let me just pop that in at test.com. And if I click tab on my keyboard, it does allow me to enable the online services from here as well. So if you use the online services, the online payslips, you can set that up in here. And what this means is that this person will get the profile created the next time the payslips are uploaded. And this email address would become their login for the portal. If you're not sure what I mean by this, or you're not sure what the online services are, don't worry, we are actually running a few webinars this month on this topic, which will go through what it is, how to set it up, and how to use it as well. And it is a free service to use with Payroll, so you can use the online payslips for free. So I would advise just making the most of that, and just pop along, see if you want to know a little bit more about the online payslips. But as I mentioned, the information marked with this little star here, this is mandatory. So I'm just going to continue, and I'm going to enter the date of birth for this employee, and also whether I've conducted a right to work check or not. I'm going to select yes, and if I did want to record any further details of this, I'm going to click the details button, select the document type, for example UK passport, and I could enter the expiry date and passport number as well. And this information would be recorded in the employee's record. I am just going to leave that blank though, so I'll click cancel. And moving on, I'll just enter the employee's start date. They're starting with me on the 8th of July. Whether they're an apprentice or not, so you do have that tick box too. And this is where you would record bank details. Now, I am actually going to add those at a later date in the records. I'll leave those blank, but just double check the pay frequency too, so they're a monthly employee. Moving on to the top right, so this is where the all-important starter form information is. On the P45, as we've seen, you will get most of this information in here from there. So that'll include the date left previous employment, the total pay and total taxed date, and their tax code at leaving date as well. But one of the things that you won't get from the P45 is the starting declaration. And this is why it's a good idea to get them to fill in that starter checklist. So that way they'll answer those questions about jobs, and they will be able to choose a statement for themselves, either A, B or C. You won't get that just from a P45. This particular employee, they don't have a P45, so I'm going to instead select P46. So remember, that was what a starter checklist was known as. With that selected, I'll then just need to select the statement for this employee, which is actually statement B. And that does automatically assign the relevant tax code to them as well, which for this employee is 1257L on a week 1, month 1 basis. I'm then going to go ahead and enter the national insurance number for this employee. And if you aren't sure what this is, don't make it up. There is a little tick box to say that you don't know what that is. So just make sure you tick that if you're not sure. And again, I'll just select that national insurance category as well. So this employee is just the standard rate contributions, but you do have the rest of the options in there too. On the starter form, the starter checklist that they gave me, they've not specified that they need to continue paying a student loan or postgraduate loan. So I'm just going to leave those as no. And underneath this is where the department had automatically copied across, so I don't need to change that. But you also have the pension scheme here as well. Now, quick note about this. If you're using the pensions module in Payroll, you must let the module assign the pension scheme. So leave this without the scheme selected. You don't need to do this manually. You would let the pension assessment assess the employee and assign the scheme just to ensure the correct information is generated for your pension provider. If you don't use the pensions module though, you would just simply select the scheme from the drop down in here. And not a mandatory field, but you can also add a job title if you wish. So if there were a manager, for example, you've just got that there. And the same again, this is not mandatory, but I am actually going to enter the information for their gross salary. So that's going to be £25,000 per year. And Payroll is going to automatically convert this to a monthly salary in the payments because we've specified that they're a monthly employee. And then some more information that was copied across is the the pay elements in here. So they've already been added for me, but if I did have any more that I wanted to add, I would just use the drop down here and select them as necessary. And same with deductions as well. But that is all I'm going to enter for now. So we do have enough information in here for Payroll to create the record. So I'm going to click on Save and Clear in the bottom left. And that's going to clear the form down, ready for me to enter any other employee information. So if I was adding multiple employees, I would be able to repeat those steps. As I said, I'm going to enter the bank information at a later date, so I'll click OK to this. But you'll see it does also come up with this notice. So this is requiring me to enter the contracted hours for the employee because we've got a factor pay element. So this pay element needs the contracted hours. So I'll click OK. We can see it's cleared the form. So I'm just going to click Close. And we can see that it's created that new employee's record for me. Now for anything further I need to add, or if I just want to view the record, I'll right click and open the employee. And in this case, that notice said that I do need to enter the contracted hours for them. So I'll do that in the employment tab, and I'll go down to salary. And I'm going to enter their contracted hours. So it's already got the salary which I've entered, but I'm going to tell Payroll that they're working 40 hours per week, and then click Save. I'll save the record again. And this is that employee's record all sorted now, so it's all set up and it's ready to use the next time that I process payroll. And something to note as well, I did mention that Payroll works out their monthly salary if they were a monthly employee automatically based on that information that I've entered. But if for the first period that they've not worked the full month, let's say they started halfway through, you may need to do an adjustment to their pay for the days that they've actually worked. So just bear that in mind. Let's go back to the sides for now. That was adding a new starter with the starter form and using the quick employee option as well. But remember, you do also have the employee wizard, so that allows you to enter the same information but on a step-by-step basis instead. Now, in terms of notifying HMRC of this new starter, this is done automatically when you send the first FPS for the employee. The information sent across will include their start date, their address, the starter declaration, and a student loan indicator as well. And when you get to the important information window of the FPS, you'll see in that screenshot on the right, it does have a start date in the starter column against the employee. So to inform HMRC, all you need to do is send your FPS, which I will be showing you a little bit later on. But before I move on to leavers, I do have a section covering some common questions with starters, so we'll take a little look at these first. The first common question is, what if the leaving date on a P45 is in a previous tax year? So this is a really common one. If the employee, for example mine, who was joining me in July, left their previous employment in March, the new tax year began in April. So they left their previous employment last tax year. If that's the case, the key thing here is no previous pay or tax needs to be entered, as they aren't relevant for the current tax year. And actually, the last payroll year end update to version 30 made sure that the previous pay and tax boxes would be greyed out. And that's if the date left previous employment entered was in a previous tax year. So on the P45, just make sure you've checked that date. But if the date is from a previous tax year, no previous pay or tax needs to be entered. And for more advice of exactly what to do and what the employee's new tax code should be, there is a link on the handout there going to the gov.uk website. Second question we've got is, what if an employee does not have a P45 or start a checklist? So sometimes you won't get this information for payroll, and if that is the case, you can choose P46 and the starting declaration as none. What this will do is put them on a 0T tax code for the time being, which might prompt the employee to get one of those forms for you. But if not, you should get a new tax code notice from HMRC at some point, which will give you the new tax code for the employee. So if you've got neither a P45 or a starter checklist, just choose P46 and the starting declaration as none. And then third one is, what if I receive a P45 or start a checklist after the employee's first FPS? And the answer to this depends on whether you've received a new tax code notice from HMRC. So if you have received a new tax code notice, forget about the P45 or start a checklist and just go with that new tax code. But if you haven't, you are able to use the starter form wizard in the employee's record, and that'll allow you to input the details from the starter form after the fact. So I just want to show you where that is in the records. Let me just pop back to payroll. So if I hadn't received a new notice for this employee, for example, I would open up the record and I would click on starter form at the top. And for example, if the employee given me a P45, I would select P45 and I would just be able to work through and input those details. So that's just at the top of the record there. But when someone leaves your employment, there are a few things to do in payroll just to make sure that you've marked them as a leaver and reported this correctly to HMRC as well. And the first thing is making sure that you've processed the final pay run. And during this last pay run and at the payments, you'll see this tick box that I've highlighted on the right. And this is just saying that you need to select the tick box if your employee is leaving and that it's the final payment. This tick box does quite a few things. It is an important one to check, specifically because it recalculates directors' national insurance. So for those who are a pro rata director, as directors are calculated on an annual basis, the national insurance does need to be recalculated just to make sure it's correct up to this final payment. This tick box also pays cash rounding amounts, pays outstanding holiday fund to the employee, and it pays tax refunds withheld to a trade dispute, and also calculates outstanding items. So it basically makes sure everything is sorted and calculated, ready for the employee leaving. Now, if none of those bullet points apply to your employee, you'll likely see no difference to the pay when you tick the box, but it is definitely best practice to tick it just in case there's anything that needs to be recalculated or paid to them in the final pay run. And once you've entered that final pay for the employee and you've ticked that box, you can move on with the rest of your pay run. And when you process a leaver, there are three main things that you need to do. And these are to update the records, run the leaver wizard for the employee, which includes producing the P45, and submitting the full payment submission as well, which of course is what informs HMRC of the leaver and their details. And these are things I will be demonstrating as well. And then once you've done this, a few other things to note. So as I said, the leaver details are included in the FPS. You'll see, similar with the starter, on that screenshot you've got the leaver date next to the employee, but you must also notify the pension provider of the leaver. And if you need any guidance on this, be sure to contact your pension provider. It can vary from one provider to the other of how you notify them. But let me turn my camera off. We'll go back to a demonstration and I'll show you how to process a leaver. So I've got my employee list here and I've not processed payroll just yet. So we'll do this and we'll mark the employee who's leaving me as a leaver. The person who's leaving me is employee number 1. They're actually a director as well, so that means I can show you that final payment tick box in enter payments, and I'll show you that recalculation of the directors and I, which I mentioned as well. So first things first, I am going to double check my process date. So I'll go to my payroll tasks. I've got a monthly payroll and I pay on the last day of the month, so 31st of July is my process date. And a little top tip for those of you who don't know as well, you can just double check what your process date's set to in the bottom right of payroll as well. I'm then going to clear and swap just to highlight all of my employees and click on enter payments from my payroll tasks. So first employee, this is my director. There's no difference to the pay, it's just going to stay the exact same this period. But of course, if someone is leaving you, you might have to adjust their payments in here depending on the leave date. But what I am going to do is go ahead and tick this box just at the bottom to inform payroll that they're leaving, and of course that it's a final payment. Now back on the slides, I showed you that this tick box does a few things, including recalculating the director's national insurance. And now that I've ticked this box, a message has come up advising me of my next steps for the employee, including updating the records, processing the leaver details, and submitting the FPS as well. So I will be showing you all of these, and I'll click OK to this. And it then comes up with this message too. So this is informing me that the employee is a director. And if you just take a note, a kind of mental note of this national insurance contribution down here, once I click OK, I can see there's quite a dramatic change in that national insurance there as well. So that is that director's national insurance recalculation that's happened. And they're actually owed national insurance now, so it's a refund. What that's done, it's recalculated the contributions based on the annual thresholds instead of their cumulative earnings for the entire year. And what this does is just ensure that all of the outstanding contributions are accurately deducted from their final payment. And bear in mind, this figure will be different from director to director. You might not get as dramatic a difference as I have, but it depends on a whole variety of factors. So you could see a completely different figure there after the recalculation. But once you're happy with the pay, you can go ahead and click on Save Next and just move through your employees as you normally would. I've got no other changes to make, but I do want to just check my new starter. I just want to make sure that they've got their pay in there. So I'll skip ahead to employee number 11. Perfect, and that is their salary all in there. And I'm just going to close enter payments. At this point, it would just be your normal next steps. So your pension assessment, pre-update reports, and uploading the online payslips, whatever you do after enter payments. But for today, I am actually going to go ahead and skip to update the records for all of my employees. Little reminder of the pre-update reports as well. And of course, always take a backup at this point. Very important to have a pre-update backup, just in case anything goes wrong or you need to go back to where you were. You've got that data nice and secure and backed up. But I'm going to click next. I'm just going to work through the employee wizard, double check the employees that are getting updated, and click Finish. And you'll notice it does come up with this message to say they have been updated, but a little prompt to use the Leaver Wizard to complete the details of anyone leaving your employment, and a reminder of the full payment submission as well. And that's exactly what we're going to do now. So we see the last updated date's now my pay date, and I'm just going to move on and run the Leaver Wizard. Now there are a few places that you can run the Leaver Wizard from. I will show you a few of those options. And an important note as well, just make sure you've only got the employees who are leaving you highlighted, or you could accidentally mark more employees as leavers. So one person's leaving me, I've got that one person highlighted. And if I open up the record and go to employment, I do have the option of the Leaver Wizard just at the bottom there. And another place that I can run that from is the Wizards menu in the top left, and Leaver. That's another option. But what I'm actually going to do is from the Employee Tasks and Leaver. So it does bring up the same Leaver Wizard each time. It's totally preference which one you use. But let's work through this wizard. So the first page, this is like a little overview of what the Leaver Wizard does, along with a little note at the bottom that you should have completed your final pay run for this employee, which we have. So I'll click Next. I'm just going to check the name, so definitely make sure it's the correct employee you're marking as a leaver. Enter their leave date as well. So it has defaulted to my process date, which is fine for this employee. So they are leaving on the 31st, but just make sure that that's the date that the employee's leaving. And you will also have a tick box on the right here. So if you're making the employee a leaver because they've passed away, you do have that tick box. It's not a nice subject. Hopefully it doesn't happen to any of you, but if it does, just make sure that you've ticked that box there. Then underneath the leave date, this is where you would select your stationery. So you've got quite a few different layouts for the P45. The one I would advise, the most common one, is the P45 plain paper for e-submissions. And it also can be printed onto plain paper, this one as well. You can print it straight from here. I always like to preview it first, so let's click on that and take a look. It's the same layout as the one I showed you at the beginning of the webinar for my new starter, so we'll just make it a little bit bigger. But this is what it produces for you. And of course you can print it from here onto plain paper, and you can export it if you did want to save it to your computer as well. But now that that leave date's entered, I've produced that P45, I can go ahead and click Finish on the Leaver Wizard. And once I have, straight away, you'll notice this employee status has changed to leaver. And if I just open up the record and go to the Employment tab, we can see it's added a leave date for them as well. Now, if you find you've done this by mistake and the employee isn't actually leaving, all you need to do is remove the leave date and click Save, and you're more than okay just to continue processing that employee as normal. I'm just going to pop that back in again though. Save the record and move on to my next step, which will be the full payment submission. So let me just highlight everybody again. Go back to my payroll tasks and click on full payment submission. So this is just the normal FPS, but there is a few things I'd like to point out. So I'll click Continue, check those details there, and click Submit. And in here, this is what I want to show you. So we can see the employee that we've just marked as a leaver. They've got that leaver date next to them. And if I scroll down as well, that new starter, they've also got their start date there too. So we know that that information is going across to HMRC. I'll hit Submit and wait for that to go across to HMRC. And then of course it's a case of issuing that P45 to the employee. So whether you want to email it or print it out, totally up to you. And also notifying the pension provider of the leaver as well. And a little important note too, so the P45, you can only issue one of these to your employee. So even if there's been a change to their wage, a change to what they've been paid, if you've already issued the P45, you cannot issue another one, and that's HMRC guidance on that. But that's the employee marked as a leaver, and that's HMRC informed as well. So we'll just back to the slides. I just want to have a little bit of a recap of what we did there in that leaver section. I'll just quickly go back there. Perfect. So we tick the box in enter payments to say that it was the employee's last payment and that the employee was leaving. Very important to remember that box, especially if you've got a director, as we saw it recalculated that national insurance. We then updated the records. We ran the leaver wizard for the employee, which also produced the P45 in there for them as well. And then we submitted the full payment submission, which notified HMRC of the leaver, as well as the usual liabilities as well. And of course, it did have that starters information too. And just a reminder as well, just to notify your pension provider of any leavers. And if you're not sure how to do this, do contact your pension provider. But that has brought us to the end of the main webinar content this afternoon. We've still got about 5 minutes or so just to keep answering those questions. And you still do have time to download the handouts as well. So if you want the slides from the presentation, do download those. And I can see you've kept Paddy, Louise and Duncan very busy on the questions, but do keep them coming. We still have time for those. And one last thing I want to touch on is the further support that we've got available to you all as well, starting with the upcoming webinars this month. So we've got Get Your Payroll Done. We've got Starters and Leavers, which is of course what you've just attended today. I'm running the HMRC Secure Mailbox as well. Nominal Link. Mastering Mistakes, that's things like the rollback option, restoring and recovering and things like that. And also the online pay slips, which I mentioned during this session as well. So if you do want to know more about those, be sure to register for them. As always, you'll have the live Q&A throughout those webinars as well if you've got any questions. And you can head to sage.co.uk/webinars for them. We've also got our help centre, so sage.co.uk/help, all available from the whole homepage and various other places in payroll as well. All of the help articles and things that I've linked on these slides have come from the help centre. It's a fantastic resource just to get these articles on a whole variety of topics, so it's not just starters and leavers. Every payroll topic you can think of, just search what you need and those results will come up. It's also got videos and ways to get in touch, so if you do need any technical support, you can get in touch with our experts here. And lastly, we've got Sage University as well. So here you can set up a free account, you can access free e-learning and bite-sized learning, as well as earning product certification as well. And it's not just on Sage 50 Payroll, it's other Sage products as well. So it's a great way to expand your knowledge on those products. But that has brought us to the end of Starters and Leavers. As I said, I will hang around for a few more minutes just to make sure we've answered all of those questions. But if you are leaving us now, remember that you can download the handout, which will include the slides, and feel free to copy and paste the questions and answers as well. So if there's any you would like to keep for future reference, just copy and paste those into something like a Word document. There's unfortunately not a way of downloading those from the webinar. And last thing from me, there is a short survey that you'll get as you exit the webinar. If you've got just a minute to fill that out, me and the webinar team, we would really appreciate it. The feedback goes a long way. We do read every single comment and we try to make these webinars the best that they can be. So we would really appreciate any feedback that you've got. But I can see there is still questions coming in. So I'm going to go on mute for a few minutes just to help with those. And I'll be back in a few minutes just to say goodbye and end the webinar. So I won't be long. Hello everybody, that's just me back again. Thank you so much for all of those questions and for your time this afternoon. It looks like most, if not all, of those questions have been answered. I think we're getting the last ones out to you all now. But a big thank you to Duncan, Paddy and Louise for being on hand there behind the scenes. Really appreciate it. But it is now time to say goodbye and end the webinar. So hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've learned something new. and we do hope to see you on some more webinars in the future. So from myself and the webinar team, it's goodbye for now.